The Cardinals battled back from an early deficit on Tuesday night against the Royals, but, well, Kansas City had a counterpunch prepared for Andre Pallante and the Cardinals bullpen. We'll talk about it and whether or not it might mean Andre Pallante's rotation spot is up for grabs coming up on b-schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you, trying something a little bit new here because I'm walking back to my car after covering the Cardinals' loss to the Royals on Tuesday night. 10-7, the Royals got the win in Game 1 of the I-70 series. And now the last time I did something similar to this, I did get shot walking downtown. But this time no video, so I'll be able to watch my surroundings a little better. But it's pretty late at night, and so to get this podcast out before the morning time on Wednesday, I thought this might have to be the way that I go. So we're going to try this. Excuse the very downtown sounds that you can hear in the background. It is exactly how it sounds. There's an ambulance going by. Let's talk about this one, as the Cardinals, man, they let one slip away in some pretty disappointing fashion. To be able to mount a rally the way the Cardinals were able after the Bobby Witt 2-run homer got things going for the Royals in the first inning, it's disappointing to say the least. I mean, the Cardinals were well in position to make this a game that they win going away. 7 runs unanswered until the point at which the Royals started answering with 8 consecutive runs of their own. So you're up 7-2. Through 3 innings of play, Andre Palante started to settle in, which is what makes the 5th inning so strange and honestly unfortunate for the St. Louis Cardinals, because he didn't look like you want to look in that first at-bat against Bobby Witt Jr., obviously. Takes him deep for a 2-0 lead, but was able to go 3 scoreless in a row after that before you get to the 5th inning, where everything just suddenly unraveled for Palante. He allows a ground ball by Jack Caglione, the Royals' stud prospect, who got the call up for the game, his major league debut on Tuesday night. 112 miles per hour off the bat. Welcome to the big leagues, kid. There were a couple of plays in this game tonight that Jack Caglione certainly would have thought he had maybe secured his first career big league base hit. Victor Scott II with a great robbery at the wall of what would have been extra bases for Caglione. Later, I believe it was Arenado took one away. 112 off the bat, though, that doesn't always get you what you're looking for at the big league level. It was the hardest ball that was hit in the inning against Palante, but certainly there were balls that were more damaging to the Cardinals' chances to win the game. A home run for Nick Lofton, and then 4 consecutive singles by the Royals. 4 of the 6 batted balls in the inning were over 100 miles per hour off Andre Palante. And I saw a lot of the social media commentary and understand why folks would be disappointed about the way that Andre Palante pitched tonight. And really, I think people were ready to extend that thought process to the way that he's looked all season long. But you got to remember, like, this is my take on it. I'm not saying that every Palante outing looks the part. I'm not saying every Palante outing visually is a great, pleasurable experience, right? He's had the tendency to walk too many batters at times this season. He's a pitch-to-contact guy by his nature, so when you combine those walks with, more pitch-to-contact and hard contact that sometimes finds its way through the infield or sometimes over the fence, as he gave up a couple of homers tonight. Again, you can understand, and Cardinals fans definitely know what I'm talking about here, that it's not always the most pleasant viewing experience, right? But the numbers bore out prior to tonight that Andre Palante was giving you basically middling, back-of-the-rotation types of performances. Like, you can live with the 4.23 ERA that he came into Tuesday night sporting. Maybe not as happy about the 4.91 ERA that he sports at the end of Tuesday night, but this was the first game all season that Andre Palante gave up more than 4 runs in a game, earned or unearned. He had not had a game in which he had allowed 5 runs of any kind. I'm not saying that's a vastly difficult bar to clear for a guy in the rotation. You'd like to think that rarely are guys getting beat around to that point, but I mean, to Palante's credit, the games that he has struggled this year, he has largely been able to limit the damage in the box score, more or less, to 3 runs, 4 runs, not usually getting to a quality start recently, 5 2/3. Those types of outings are what you've gotten from Andre Pallante lately, and this was one that was by far the worst. But again, it was the first time that this had happened to quite this extent. So I'm sounding like I'm coming on in defense of Andre Pallante here, because I am, even though I understand that it's looked optically the way that a lot of Cardinals fans feel that it has, which is not particularly strong. Here's my stance on this, though. I don't see the Cardinals replacing Andre Pallante in the rotation, at least not yet. And here's why. That's not me saying that Michael McGreevy is not going to be on this team very soon. In fact, I think you'll see Michael McGreevy start a game for the Cardinals within the next 7 days, because he's on turn. If the Cardinals wanted to have him replace Andre Pallante, they could do that. But I think they're going to go a slightly different route with it. Michael McGreevy, as we have talked about, I wrote about it for Sports Hub STL last week or so. Looking ahead to this June schedule, it's a toughie in terms of the lack of off days scheduled for the Cardinals. They're going to have to figure things out without the benefit of every Thursday off, like they basically had during the month of May. They're going to have to figure things out with only 1 day off scheduled between right now and the 3rd of July. That's basically a month. I'm recording this as I walk downtown St. Louis, approaching the spot where I did get clipped that one time. It was a bit of a drive-by, but it was also one of those scenarios where it wasn't a real gun, so it's okay. Anyhow, you could feel the nervousness kind of tick up in my voice there, though, couldn't you? Anyhow, I look at this as Andre Pallante is probably going to have a little bit more time to work through the struggles that he is currently exhibiting, because I think the Cardinals just need to go back to that modified 6-man rotation for a little bit. I call it modified because the first time they did it, it never really was a 6-man rotation. It was Steven Matz parachuting in to start once or twice in these lengthy stretches where the Cardinals didn't have any off days. And that's basically what you're looking at again. And it was interesting to hear Oliver Marmol tonight, a key spot in this game. As the Cardinals were leading 7-3, I think the biggest spot in the game was that Bobby Witt Jr. at bat in the 5th inning, where it just felt like Palante was wearing down. It didn't feel like he had any sort of put-away stuff tonight. His last outing, he gave up 4 runs or whatever it was, but he had 7 strikeouts. So we have seen Palante at times be able to gear it up when it comes to the notion of swing and miss. But tonight, it just did not seem like he had any sort of put-away capacity in this one.
And so, as a transition back home for the remainder of the podcast, appreciate you bearing with me for the early minutes. I just felt like it was the only way to get this show done tonight, as we're well after the midnight hour, as I pick this recording back up after my lengthy drive back home. It was a spot there for Bobby Witt Jr. where I just thought, man, Palante's not going to be able to put him away. And with 1 out in the inning, you're kind of hoping for a double play ball, but that's not all too realistic when you think about the profile of Bobby Witt Jr. I mean, he'll sharply hit the ball somewhere, sure, but to think that they'll be able to double him off, even if it is a hard hit ball, it's just a very difficult proposition to get Pallante out of that inning successfully. So I do think it was a pretty relevant question. At the moment it happened, again, this wasn't second guessing. I was thinking, man, I don't know that I would leave Pallante in to face Bobby Witt here. I don't know that the Cardinals have an obvious right-handed example from their bullpen that you'd want to throw into that spot. Kyle Leahy has struggled recently. He ended up pitching in this game and struggling in this game. Do you really want to bring him into the 5th inning, even if he wasn't recently struggling? That maybe is his spot, but you're talking about a game that was, I mean, it was 7-3 when this at-bat took place. A base hit is the result, and that makes it 7-5. Ollie then goes to Steven Matz, but it was a little bit too late at that point. Well, I guess it wasn't too late, but it was still a very dangerous spot, and Matz didn't have his best stuff either. The Royals were really squaring him up. So, you know, maybe there was just no great solution to this question or to this problem really for Oliver Marmol, but the question was asked post-game about that spot and why did he let Andre Pallante faced Bobby Witt Jr. in that situation, and Oliver Marmol gave his answer, and we'll play it for you here.
Way into having him face Witt that in that time, just the
You're about to play 13 in a row.
Yeah.
You want to empty out that early. Day 1 of 13 in a row with a guy at 55, 60 pitches. You're asking for it, so you're hoping like hell that one of those are hits, and like you're about to play a really long stretch of games. That's kind of the way you think about that one. Yeah.
So you hear there the question from Derek Gould, and the answer from Ollie is basically, look, you're coming into a stretch. This is day 1 of playing whatever it is, 13 days in a row without an off day. And is that the way you really want to get behind the 8 ball, burning up your bullpen, aggressively attacking a situation in the 5th inning with 1 out? Like, my thought would be maybe it is, but also, if your options that you're really looking at aren't ones that are particularly appealing, and you're also kind of dealing with the fact that when he took him out after the Witt at bat, it was still a 7-5 lead. So, like, the game hadn't yet been blown, but it was a lot closer than at that point to teetering off the edge. And so that's the risk you run. And by the time you bring in Matz, look, maybe Matz on a different day has better stuff and is able to get the Cardinals out of the rest of that jam, and you still have a lead. But that's not the way that it went. Matz got hit around. Kyle Leahy, his problem seemed to be in the following inning, not having a lot of confidence in what his stuff is doing in the zone right now. Guys seem to be a lot more sharply on Kyle Leahy lately, and you're seeing that in the results. It's a case for him where I think he had been so in the strike zone, and now you're starting to see adjustments being made to him, and so he's maybe a little bit afraid, as a guy who doesn't have a ton of swing and miss either, to live in the zone, and you get forced out of the zone a little bit, and then when you have to dip back into the zone, you're behind it counts, and guys get better pitches to hit. So that's sort of been the vicious cycle for Kyle Leahy, but it happened a little bit where, it didn't happen. I mentioned off the top or earlier in the show, Palante, normally what you're talking about with him and why it's often maybe not so visually appealing to watch his outings is, man, he's walking guys, and then sometimes those walks are coming around to score. He didn't walk anybody tonight. And that was just a part of it where you're like, all right, he's in the zone, he's pounding strikes, but hittable strikes. And, his fastball getting hit, his sinker, it just was not a night where he had anybody really off balance. Steven Matz, very similar. I mean, he didn't walk anybody, had a couple of strikeouts of his 4 outs recorded, but gave up 3 hits, and nobody was really cheated out there for the Royals offensively. Kyle Leahy had 1 walk, couple of hits allowed, charged with an earned run, had inherited runners come around to score against him after he came in for Matz in the 6th, and that was all she wrote, really. The Cardinals just didn't have offensively the ability to battle back tonight. Again, I should say. They did it once. It was 2-0 Royals before you even got into your seat, 7-2 Cardinals after 3 innings. But 8 runs in a row for the Royals from the 5th and 6th inning was all that they would need, and the Cardinals just couldn't mount any pressure. They had a couple of opportunities later in the game, but as Ollie Marmol said, we just got beat, and they couldn't capitalize on some of those later chances to be able to climb back into this game. There was a spot where Victor Scott had 1st and 3rd with 2 outs and struck out. I saw somebody maybe questioning why not pinch hit for him in that situation and maybe go with somebody that can try and tie the game right then and there. I just don't think the Cardinals have a ton of great options off their bench, and both lefties that you really would think about were in the game already. Gorman at DH and Alec Burleson at right field. Both went yard tonight for whatever that's worth. I mean, Burleson swinging a hot bat still. Suddenly OPS is up to 771, the average up to 291. He was 3 for 4 tonight. And a couple of RBIs, had the homer. Nolan Gorman, 2 for 4 with a couple of RBIs, also reached via walk. So he's on base 3 times tonight. But, man, when the Cardinals needed Gorman the most, he was nowhere to be found in the very end of this game with a strikeout swinging where 98-mile-per-hour fastball up and in. And to my eye, it almost looked like Gorman swung the bat and nearly hit himself in the face with it. I mean, it was not a competitive swing. And, I mean, that guy, again, on base 3 times, hit a homer, a huge swing. You hope that it can spark something for him as you move forward here, because he's going to get opportunity with Walker right now on the injured list. And it sounds like he's not maybe super close to returning because took some swings and the wrist was still kind of giving him trouble. So this is, you talk about runway. This is going to be runway for Nolan Gorman, and we'll see what he does with it. But unfortunately, Cardinals did have another opportunity there in the ninth inning. Gorman was, I believe, representing the tying run and struck out up and in. Guys probably worrying about breaking balls, rather, diving out over the plate, trying to protect, thinking about that aspect of it. And then when they pound him 98 up and in, he was a pretzel for that one. But it was interesting. I do believe Joel Pozo was standing on deck in that spot for Victor Scott. So I had somebody comment to me on Twitter that why not pinch hit for him there, and I didn't end up responding, but I was thinking about it, and it's just like, man, I think it was maybe the seventh inning when that happened with Vic previously. You got runners on first and third. You do have a chance there. Vic has really been struggling at the plate, but he's your number 9 batter, and your two lefties that would have made the most sense there were already in the game. So I just don't necessarily know if you're looking off your bench at that point. It's all righties. It's Barrero, it's Pajes, it's Pozo, it's Valade. I just don't think the Cardinals look at that bench and say they've got a bunch of thump that they're really excited to use. And maybe that becomes a question again. It's like, why not? Why does the bench look like that? And if you're not really feeling any of those options, then would it make sense to maybe shuffle the bench a little bit? But I also think that this was and will continue to be a little bit unique, because normally you might have a lefty off your bench. But then you're also talking about, okay, who plays center field? We've seen it happen when Ollie has done this. I believe he did it in the Rangers series over the weekend, where you go for it and try to win the game there or tie the game there, and you end up sending out a lesser defense that comes back to bite you. I mean, Burleson's already in right field. You're going to put Barrero, I guess, in center. I guess you could put Valade in center. Gap hits by the Royals tonight. I mean, there was the one that gave him the lead 8-7 was a gapper into right center, but it was, to the deepest part of the gap, and Burleson is Burleson, and he's going to get to it when he gets to it. Runner ended up scoring from first on the double. So just all sorts of thoughts maybe going through my mind about that. I just don't think it's a spot where, they have the thump off the bench necessarily to make that move, but for whatever it's worth, in the ninth inning, they were going to do it. If Gorman had reached, I believe Pozo would have batted. At least that's what they were showing for Victor Scott II. And at that point, you're not worried about your defense because the game's over if you don't come through. So notable there. Good to see the swing from Gorman, but like I said, you're still getting the ups with the downs with him. So we'll see moving forward how often he gets to play. But I would say Burleson, bright spot. And the way the Cardinals approached it against, I thought Michael Lorenzen tonight was a bright spot. I mean, they really tagged him, and they got to him, and they were hitting him hard. All 7 earned runs come against him in 2 2/3. They chased him from the game in the third inning. You had some really good swings taken by this lineup against him. Mason Wynn was a multi-hit game. Cardinals walked 5 times in the affair. Mason Wynn on base 3 times. Newt Barr 1 for 4. Donovan, Contreras, and Herrera, as well as Arenado, also contributing 1 hit apiece. Cardinals, I mean, they did their jobs, and then they kind of faltered off offensively, but you would like to think if you score 7 runs, that could be enough to win the game. It obviously wasn't here, and so it's disappointment, especially coming off the weekend where you lose 2 of 3, but it's the way that they lost as well. You scored only 4 runs all weekend, and then you fix that, right? The offense takes a really good approach, knocks a starter from the game early, but you're not able to hold that lead. That is definitely a way that it stinks, and I think it stung more for Cardinals fans. I saw a ton of it, as I mentioned earlier, on social media, talking about Pallante and his spot, and it needs to be, he needs to be replaced. I don't think they'll replace him in the rotation. As I mentioned previously, I think it's going to be a 6-man rotation for a little bit. Not even a 6-man rotation, but you're going to get McGreevy starting in the next 7 days. Is it before Palante? Is it after Palante? I don't know, but he's going to pitch. I would just be surprised if they don't get McGreevy up here. And then does he go twice during this lengthy stint, or is it just once, back down, and then he's ready to go again in late June when you have kind of another similar stint where you don't have any off days? I think this is the way that the Cardinals can manage it. And as I have talked about previously, I think it makes a lot more sense to do it right now with McGreevy than trying to pull Steven Matz out of his role. Obviously, struggled tonight, but the role that he's in is a role that has been valuable for the Cardinals out of the bullpen. And McGreevy obviously deserves an opportunity. So I kind of look at it through those lenses and just feel like it's what makes the most sense, and I feel like it is what the Cardinals are going to do. We'll go down on the farm here in just a moment to maybe articulate a little bit more of why I am convinced that is what's coming. and we'll take it from there. I'm sure there were things that I had meant to get to, but it's almost 1 a.m., so if you have thoughts about this game in particular that I didn't get to, throw your comments out there on YouTube. You can also shoot me a message, as always. I'm at b-schaefer12 on Twitter. Really do try to get in the weeds and talk about what you guys want to have talked about. But I'm sure a decent amount of that is maybe related to Michael McGreevy. So let's go ahead and do that right now as we go down on the farm.
It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh?
So as I discussed, I don't think it's time for the Cardinals to take Andre Pallante out of the rotation. And keep in mind, he was their best starter after late May last year, putting up an ERA in the 3.5 range. I mean, he was really consistent for them. And if this is going to be a runway season, maybe that's a guy that should get a little bit more runway. I know the results aren't very strong right now, and tonight was obviously his worst outing of the season. But if you're talking about allowing guys to work through some things, if it's the Gorman equivalent, which I don't think it quite is for Palante, but if Gorman's going to continue to play where his numbers were his numbers, Palante has at least a track record more recently that I think you give him an opportunity to pitch out of it. And I also think it's going to coincide very nicely with the fact that Michael McGreevy is coming up. I mean, he's going to come up, as I said, within the next week or so. And when he does, it's going to be to make sort of a spot start. And I'm further emboldened in that belief by looking at the box score tonight for Memphis. Michael McGreevy, shutout performance, but only 4 1/3 innings. Well, did he get hurt? No. He finished with exactly 75 pitches. Almost 2 on the nose for if you were saying, hey, let's get him out there, have him throw, keep him healthy, keep him rested, and ready to go because the big league club is going to need him soon. Don't get him hurt by overextending him in this AAA outing. We don't need that. And that's what happened. 4 1/3, scoreless for the Memphis Redbirds starter as the Redbirds beat the Indianapolis Indians 4-2 at home. 4 hits allowed, 1 walk allowed, 4 strikeouts. McGreevy with a 2.78 ERA in AAA this year. Yeah, we will see Michael McGreevy at some point over the next week or so. That is my belief. And then what happens? Okay, maybe it's for 1 start and they send him back down. Maybe he pitches well and they say, we can kind of fudge it and get through with a 6-man rotation and he can make 2 starts in a row. Maybe they just say, hey, he can stay in the rotation for June. Maybe there's a point at which his performances outpace Andre Palante's, and then we start to have a conversation about what it looks like when you get back to a 5-man rotation. But I just don't. I think Andre Palante is starting again before that happens because the Cardinals are in that exact scenario that they were in last time when they used Steven Matz sporadically as a starter. And this time you don't have to pull somebody from a bullpen role and have him be limited. Like you can call up McGreevy. Obviously, if you send him back down, 15 days that you'd have to wait to call him back up. And so maybe that's the way that they'll do it. Maybe they do it once, send him down. 15 days later, it's late June. You could use him again because you're still in that stretch until July 3rd with only the 1 off day. And you obviously have only, I think, 5 times within a year that you can send a guy back up and back down. But McGreevy could be here to stay after this stint. Like, I think this is a spot where he could Wally Pip Andre Palante, but it's going to be kind of a battle that's, I think, going on simultaneously. I think both these guys are going to be in the rotation this time next week. It's just a matter of, can McGreevy do enough to compel the Cardinals to keep him there is what's going to be really interesting because it's going to be designed as almost a spot start and then maybe another spot start. But that's where I think, like, as you get into beginning of July, if McGreevy makes 2 starts in June, which maybe it'll be less, maybe it'll be more. I'm just trying to figure out calendar-wise what that looks like. That's where it starts to get really interesting because, okay, how many did Andre Palante make and who looked better? And the guy does have options. So you could option Palante if McGreevy, because, like, in theory, everybody has felt this way. Cardinals fans have felt this way. Like, oh, get McGreevy up. He'll give you better production than, whoever the flavor of the day that Cardinals fans were upset about from the rotation. Like, it was for a while, it was Michaelis, and then it's Eric Fetty, and now it's Palante. Like, they've got 3 number 4 or 5 starters in the rotation. And, that can be good enough if they're performing as they have been generally. But Palante's numbers are obviously dipping. And you want to see a better one from Liberatore because if you've got a bunch of back-end starters and your front-end guys, which is basically Libby and Sonny, if those guys aren't performing at a high level, then, what's counterbalancing the guys at the back end? Fair questions, for sure. But it's sort of all been theoretical. Like, we think McGreevy would come up and be a pretty serviceable arm if given consistent starts every 5 or 6 days, but I guess until we see that regularly, it's just kind of, well, he's been good so far when we've seen him, and so he'll continue to be good if you gave him regular opportunities. I think it's probably true. I don't think he'll be as good as his major league numbers to this point are. There's basically a 1 ERA. He's been really good, elite, going back to the chances he had last year and then so far this year. But I also think that he'll be more than serviceable. I think he'd be a number 3 in your rotation, right? Give me an ERA 3.9. Maybe it's better than that. But I'm trying to be a little bit conservative while also acknowledging that the guy could come up, pitch to more contact than you want to see, and he could get shelled a little bit for 4 or 5 ERA, whatever that might look like. But if those guys are running alongside one another and you're actually seeing them in the same rotation, and then the schedule gets to a point where you get more off days mixed in July and you decide you don't need a 6-man rotation anymore, that could be McGreevy on merit over Pallante by that point. So to answer the question that everybody, or really it wasn't a question, it was demanding in my mentions, get Palante out of here. My belief is that they're not going to do that, but McGreevy's coming in and then could end up usurping Palante, I believe, if his performances are good enough. So that was McGreevy tonight for Memphis. Keep this guy in mind, too. Ryan Fernandez, 2 scoreless innings, 3 strikeouts, 1 hit, no walks. He's starting to put it together a little bit down in Memphis. And I think the moment that the Cardinals feel confident that that's sticky, that he's back to what he had been for them, would not be surprised to see him called upon. And you got Matt Swanson into the game tonight. He's got a good ERA, 3.5, but they don't trust him. I mean, they're not to a point where they trust Matt Swanson to really be a significant factor for them and pitch in those tight spots. We just haven't really seen that yet. But, man, I'm looking back at Ryan Fernandez's numbers, and they're definitely turning a corner. Looking for the walk totals. He's still definitely mixing in some walks here and there. But over now his last 4 appearances, we have seen scoreless outings from Ryan Fernandez, and that spans about 7 total innings. And across those 7 innings, he has struck out 11. So definitely starting to turn a corner. Granted, that's AAA. It's not the big leagues, but something to notice for sure when you're thinking about the Cardinal bullpen and the state of things. So Fernandez was good, and the Redbirds got the win, 4-2 over Indy, as I mentioned. Riley O'Brien got the save for Memphis, but was touched up a little bit in that one. So it's interesting. I mean, there are some interesting names there at AAA that I think from a relief standpoint we could still end up seeing or seeing again before it's all said and done. The Springfield Cardinals got a win tonight as well, 7-2 over the Rough Riders. I believe that's Frisco. Max Rajic pitched really well for AA. 5 2/3 innings, 1 hit. 2 walks allowed, no runs, 7 strikeouts, and he trims the ERA to 4.04. He had some struggles early, but that's a really good. That's got to be the best outing of the season from Max Rajic, former minor league pitcher of the year in the Cardinals organization. Good day for JJ, 3 for 5 for Weatherhold. He scores a couple of runs. Leonardo Bernal was 3 for 5 as well. Saw on Twitter a highlight of him hit a home run. JJ had a triple in the game tonight. And Memphis wins and Springfield wins. So good to see from the top 2 affiliates in the Cardinals org. Chase Davis 1 for 4. Josh Baez was 1 for 5 with an RBI, a couple of strikeouts, seeing his numbers kind of come back down to earth a little bit. But he was just recently called up to AA, and so still kind of getting adjusted, I think, to that level. All right, that is going to do it, though, for this edition of the show. I guess I'll mention one more thing. I saw that Rainiel Rodriguez, who is another catcher, they got a lot of catchers in the system, but focus on this guy, he just hits, was called up to Palm Beach and homered in his first game there at Low A. So still a ways to go for him. Teenage prospect that had been absolutely raking, and so they called him up to Low A. Good numbers by Rodriguez and a good-looking swing as well. All right, that really will do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening and bearing with me, and we'll talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.